You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the Interactive Interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com.
So what you gonna do?
Let me talk to you, dummies.
Oh, yeah.
You're where it's at.
If you're smart like me, you gotta listen.
And if you don't listen to it,
I'll come out of your computer and body slam your ass.
Don't be a Melvin.
I will scar you. Open your third eye.
Woo! It's gonna be cool.
Oh, what a rush.
It's showtime!
We had a lovely conversation.
To the interactive interview. Interactive wrestling radio.
The Epicenter.
This week on Championship Wrestling from Arizona, Arizona State Champion Gina Rivera's I Told You show returns. And in the main event, Sway Thompson and Chris Bay continue their best of 7. Check your local listings for time and channel.
Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio right here on WrestlingEpicenter.com. On the Newsmaker line with me right now is from Championship Wrestling from Arizona. He is the man in black, Alex Salyers. Mr. Salyers, are you there?
Sure am, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on, man. I've got to tell you the truth, and we were just gassing off air, and it's kind of funny because you made me feel old because I was doing something in college when you were just a kid. But the first time I watched Championship Wrestling from Arizona, it was the night that you burned Mike James with the cigar, and you guys kind of helped me get locked into Championship Wrestling from Arizona. So I wanted to, first of all, thank you for kind of getting me hooked on the local wrestling scene.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I do it again. If it meant burning Mike James with a cigar again, I do it all over again.
Excellent. Well, we'll talk about that shortly. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about you're an interesting character. I've been reading your posts on Facebook. I've been watching your matches for a year and a half now. So it's really it's been a while that I've been tuning in and checking you out. I wanted to find out some more about who is Alex Salyers. What made you decide to get involved in professional wrestling?
I mean, I don't have this big grandeur story necessarily. It was more of just my mom was flipping through the channels when I was about 4 years old, and she must have stopped to, I don't know, go get something out of the kitchen or pick a booger. Well, I don't know. She just stopped for a second, and it just happened to be on, it just happened to land on pro wrestling, and the match happened to be Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko against each other,
Wow.
which in my opinion is, if you're going to have any first exposure to the wrestling business that is going to make you truly believe that this is a craft and an art and a sport, I don't think there's two better shoes to fit than those two that'll do it for you, especially as an impressionable 4-year-old, you know. And I was hooked ever since. My ass never left from in front of the television screen anytime wrestling was on, from 4 years old all the way up until now. My poor mother. So I decided right then and there, like I was in love, and that was my first, and for many years my only love, and that was all I did was eat, breathe, and sleep wrestling all throughout my childhood. You can only imagine how many fights I got into in elementary and middle school for that. But long story short, I ended up, you know, there was a few different matches that I saw growing up that really engraved it in my head, like I want to do this for the rest of my life, kind of thing. And once I was about 14 years old, I had just joined the football team at school, and it wasn't working out. I was kind of hard to get along with on all accounts. And my aunt had called and said she had heard about a professional wrestling promotion. It was a Lucha Libre promotion, as a matter of fact. Now defunct, but she called my mom and said, hey, I think they're looking for wrestlers, and she's not very privy to how wrestling works. My mom gave them a call and was like, hey, my son's very interested in beginning his training, and he said, come on down, and I started training at 14 years old, and not long after that, I had my first wrestling match in front of about 2,000 people, and it was I totally shit the bed out there. I wrestled 4 matches in one night. And,
were you under the mask or anything like that?
I'm sorry?
Were you under a mask at the time?
I wrestled 2 matches that night under a mask as a babyface, and 2 matches without a mask as a heel. None of which I did a good job in. Looking back and knowing what I know now, I hope to God those never resurface. I'd never hear the end of it. But you know, as time went on, I I was 1% tough and 99% lucky, and got in with the right people. I was officially trained by Lawrence Tyler.
Right.
I want to say 6 years ago. I don't know. My memory's a little foggy as far as the timeline goes, but that's when I would say I was officially trained, and been wrestling ever since. Took a little bit of time off because I had a bad neck injury and had some serious physical deficits that were really starting to show in the ring, and it was just getting to a point where I wasn't safe for myself, and I certainly didn't want to be the guy that, wasn't safe for everybody else. But
Right.
never a day of my life have I loved wrestling any less than, the same day that I began watching it when I was 4 years old. So
Pretty cool. Similar story to myself. Definitely the case. What promotion was that? What Lucha Libre company was in the area?
back at the time, it was Piranha Promotions, ran by Martin Martinez. Lawrence Tyler helped book the show, and Brian Barnett, who would later run EXW out of Celebrity Theater
Right.
and IZW. He was part of the promotion, but I don't know how much he was involved with the booking and things like that. I know he wrestled. And up at that time, I was just paying dues and setting up and tearing down. I wasn't allowed to step foot in the wrestling ring other than, setting up and tearing down and training. But at the time, it was like the biggest, to my knowledge, the biggest wrestling promotion as far as Lucha Libre went here in the state. And, I mean, nowadays it kind of seems like this state is, saturated with Lucha Libre.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. Maybe just this region of the country alone, I guess you can argue. But at the time, it seemed like that was the biggest wrestling promotion as far as Lucha Libre was concerned. We did it out of the El Gran Mercado, 35th Avenue, and I want to say Buckeye, something like that. But they had almost 1,000 people in there packed from front to back every single Sunday.
Very cool, very cool. And I might have mentioned this online, I don't remember, but I grew up in New Jersey, and you talk about oversaturation for wrestling. I mean, every weekend there was an event somewhere at the Armory, at a high school gym, everywhere. And we went a long time here in Arizona without anything. I know you mentioned EXW, which was in Celebrity Theater. Impact Zone Wrestling used to run at a bar in Tempe called The Sets. But those companies kind of seemed to not last very long. They were not always around. Now that we have Championship Wrestling from Arizona, it's so cool to be able to turn on the TV, even if it is on my DVR, and pop on Championship Wrestling from Arizona and see you guys doing what you do. I guess my question would be, how cool was it for you to get an opportunity to be on Championship Wrestling from Arizona?
I was really grateful for it. I wish the timing had been a little bit better in my personal life with some of the things that were going down. I probably would have been able to recollect and enjoy it a little bit more. But I was still dealing with some neck problems when I got on and was not totally truthful about them. But when I first started working, I initially, over and above all, when I got on and wrestled my first match on a TV taping, I will say right now, I think that was one of the greatest educational experiences I've ever had in the wrestling business. I don't think that there's anything more meaningful in regards to working an actual match than learning how to work a match on television, because you have a sophistication about the way you work and your awareness of what you're doing out there and why you're doing it. I don't think that truly sinks in until you really get to sit and study how television works, and that is so important. And still to this day, I don't think I've ever had as good of an education in anything as I have in working a televised match. So I think that is a blessing and a really good, in my opinion, it's just an awesome platform for a lot of local guys here to really spread their wings and learn how to do something so important that could really benefit them in terms of longevity in their careers as professional wrestlers. So I'm glad I get to be under that umbrella.
Very cool. Now tell me if you feel this is a fair statement. When I first started watching it, you guys kind of seemed like to be the offshoot of the Championship Wrestling from Hollywood show, and maybe a secondary show, maybe not quite as important. But over time, it seems like you guys have maybe found your footing a little more, and maybe stepped up a little bit. Maybe still not quite equal, but definitely more close to being a peer to Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Do you guys in the Arizona locker room kind of feel like, okay, we're we're making as many waves or almost as many waves as those guys are.
To a degree, I think it's been insinuated that was kind of the case. The way I have understood it, as far as a business relationship goes, I think we are a sister company that came on in the later years. But if I could give an analogy, it kind of, in a way, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing because I think it really is starting to pay off if it hasn't already. It was kind of like we were the offspring and they took the floaties off and threw us in the pool and said sink or swim. And they wanted to see how well we would do with maybe not as many resources. And you also have to take into consideration a lot of the office and the suit and tie guys also aren't local here. They still have to travel down here to film television and then edit the show in a 6-hour drive back and have all that cut and ready to go for TV by a certain deadline. So I think that maybe that does stack the cards against us a little bit as far as time constraints and the workload alone, I think grows exponentially than the fact that they have to travel all the way down here to do television. Whereas in Hollywood, they're just a hop, skip, and a jump a couple hours away, maybe even less, and then they're right there at the venue at Gorilla doing their thing. So yes, I do think maybe we were kind of at first, maybe we were kind of the afterthought. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that's totally accurate. I think maybe that was kind of the mindset of some of the guys. But looking at it now, that was an awesome thing for us because we had to learn, how to adapt and go with the flow. And we were in survival mode for certain things because, sometimes things happen that are just kind of out of your control. And
Right.
when resources are 6 hours away, finances or equipment, anything like that, when you put it into that perspective, we've had to really, cut our teeth and go into survival mode. And it really paid off because now we're coming up to episode 100 and it's our biggest episode ever. And I think the stakes have never been higher for this company. And I think it just shows how hard we've worked to stay above water and keep the ship afloat. You know what I mean? So, and that has everything to do with all the talent on the show and even more so with all the guys behind the curtain.
I agree. And I'm a fan of the company. I've been watching it, like I said, about a year and a half now since ever I found it on Channel 7. So here in local Arizona TV. So it's awesome to see that. On TV, you're the man in black. That's your persona. When I hear that, I think two things. The music guy in me thinks of Johnny Cash, and the wrestling dork in me thinks of The Undertaker. What is your influences behind the Man in Black name?
Well, it's funny that you say The Undertaker because I've never been able, no matter how hard I'm a huge Undertaker fan, I've never been able to draw to him as a character that I could relate to necessarily. That probably has to do with the fact that he is a near 7-foot giant, and considering me standing next to him, I'd probably be looking like a midget. My influence as far as the attitude goes, even if it sounds cliche, I will say Stone Cold Steve Austin had a lot to do with that. He was one of my idols growing up, which got me in a lot of trouble at school, as you can imagine. But yes, you are correct to assume that it was more influenced by Johnny Cash himself. He is absolutely a music idol of mine. I think I've taken a few pages out of his personal life, not necessarily on purpose, but yes, that is where a lot of the character had been influenced, and that was kind of a gamble because I've said this before. People initially heard Man in Black and go, "Oh, he's trying to rip off Johnny Cash." And that I would heavily argue that, because if I was intending to rip off Johnny Cash, then I would grow out my hair, slick it back, come out in a suit or something, and carry a guitar to the ring, and that would be kind of ripping him off. But I'd like to think I'm paying more homage to him than anything by doing the Man in Black character and just putting my own spin on it in a moderate culture and tying it into professional wrestling. And it's really I've gotten to do a lot of heel work, and I've had a lot of fun doing it, and it's allowed me to loosen the reins and take this Man in Black character and kind of show everybody that kind of assumed and accused me of ripping Johnny Cash off that they were totally wrong by assuming that, because I kind of made the Man in Black my own little mirror image of my personal life.
Very cool. Yeah, and that's definitely, when you say that out loud, that kind of makes a whole lot of sense. We were talking about Mike James, Miracle Mike James. He kind of has been the guy that you've been, I guess the old timers say, married to for the last year and a half Championship Wrestling from Arizona. You've been the bad guy doing the dastardly deeds to him and then the hardcore match to settle the score that didn't settle the score. And then you were tag partners. And now it's kind of flopped to where he's almost coming off as the bad guy and you're coming off as the babyface. It's really a cool story if you follow it from beginning, middle, and end here, or to where we are now. Probably not the end yet. Thoughts on working with Mike James and how the story has come full circle?
Well, yeah, I will say now the flop, as you said, was not intended. It wasn't. There wasn't something that these guys were thinking like, oh, well, in 6 months we'll turn you babyface, turn him heel, and so on and so forth. Like that wasn't the case at all. I kind of fell into the Stone Cold Steve Austin syndrome where I went out there and did my best to get booed, did my best to have every fan want to jump out of their seats and cut my throat. And for a little while it worked, and I think I did a pretty decent job at it. And then it just got to a point where it was kind of like you kind of wanted to see the Man in Black come out and stir up shit because you kind of got your kicks off for it because it gave you something good to talk about. And after a while, those boos, progressively in larger portions of the audience became cheers. And it wasn't like, well, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily for me to say, but in my recollection of the whole storyline, it wasn't like it was one match that did it either. Kind of like Bret Hart and Austin had that double turn by accident at WrestleMania 13.
Right.
It didn't really it didn't just really happen in one match for us. I think it just kind of progressed that way. And him taking some time off of TV after, I injured him with the beer bottle kind of thing. And I think there was enough time allotted for me to adapt with my character some more. And after a while, it just became so recognizable, and it became hard to turn away from it and try to ignore the fact that I was getting cheered, no matter how much I was trying not to. I don't believe in going out there being a heel trying to look cool. I think that's stupid. I think you leave your baby face open and exposed, and then everybody's screwed. But sometimes, as hard as we try as heels, we don't always get to make that decision. It's the people sitting in the seats. So that kind of happened. And I think what really solidified it was me going out there and working
EJ
on the Hollywood show. We did an Arizona taping in the Hollywood venue, and I wrestled Bad Dude Tito. And that was my first time ever working in front of that audience, and they started cheering me. And I think that may have, I could be wrong, but I think that may have really been the turning point where they're like, we have to do something, we have to address this, and this is kind of the way they went about it.
Very cool, very cool. Well, more specifically, I know that you guys have been partners and all that, but how is it working with Mike James? Do you enjoy working with him?
Yeah, I enjoy. He's a rough guy. He's one of those guys that when he comes to the curtain, love him or hate him, he's up at 150 amps the whole way through. And sometimes for some guys that's good, for some guys that's bad because he's a rough guy. He brings it every single second. And he's one of those guys that if I had to form a list of guys that I had matches with, that every single time I went into the ring with him, I felt the match the very next day when I rolled out of bed. He's at the very top of that list. And that's not an insult because I know some guys are like that, and, more power to them. So I know what I'm in for September 8th, right. Especially with the stakes being as high as they are, being the 100th episode and being billed as the biggest episode we've ever had. So far, I've enjoyed doing this I think I've gotten the most out of, I think I've gotten the benefit out of learning how to adapt my character and my storytelling and fitting into a television atmosphere. I think I had a lot to gain from working with Mike, and I'm not sure that it would have turned out this good had I been working with anybody else.
Very cool. That's a cool compliment for him, absolutely. Do you enjoy working the more hardcore style?
It's not something I really, no. If I had to be totally honest, no. I like doing it when it's reasonable. I like doing it when there's a total logical explanation for it, and I like when there's a justification for it. And in this case, I would say that this storyline specifically, this angle would be that precisely. So I don't like doing hardcore stuff just for the sake of doing hardcore stuff. I think it diminishes its value, it diminishes its meaning, and not everybody can be Mick Foley, not everybody can be Sabu, and if you ask me, especially going back to my first exposure to wrestling, seeing the technical wrestling like Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko, I like doing that more. I like sophisticated wrestling. I'm a big Johnny Saint and Billy Robinson fan. I study their work constantly. This just so happens to be a point in time where the hardcore stuff and the bloodthirst is absolutely reasonable and justified.
Very cool. Can't wait to see what you guys pull out on September 8th. Kind of to that point, you've talked a little bit about your injuries, about your neck injuries that you suffered. And online, I kind of, I didn't admit this to you when we were talking about doing an interview, but I kind of took one of your posts that you put up probably a couple months ago now, and I posted it on the newsline saying, independent wrestler from Arizona really bears his soul about pain addiction and addictions in wrestling. And I posted that as a news article. And I kept thinking then I should ask you for an interview, and kind of just by happenstance, we finally ended up here. Hope you don't mind me asking, but do you mind talking a little bit about what kind of addictions you have encountered during your time as a wrestler?
Not at all. I come from a family full of addicts, so I guess it's not hard to believe that I would fall into that kind of problem. But it started off pretty innocently. It was just injury here, injury there, and starting off at a young age, I was young and stupid and did a lot of unnecessary things out there in the ring to, try and impress audiences that weren't really going to benefit me in the long run. And I wasn't willing to listen to reason, and I started physically paying the price for it later on. And, little accident here, little accident there, and all of a sudden they're all accumulating, and it was getting hard for me to go to school. It was getting hard for me to get out of bed. It was getting hard for me to work out. And even as a young kid, I had broken my ankle and had an ankle surgery. I have a plate and screws holding my ankle together, and even at a younger age, doctors were not hesitant to prescribe you painkillers. And I also had some people in my family, they weren't hard to, if I asked them, they gave them to me because I was a worker. I knew how to make them believe that I really needed them. And it wasn't that I was super addicted to them in high school. Maybe that was a precursor, and I was just none the wiser. But I did notice, after I became a dad, unfortunately, that was when it started happening. I was working 2 jobs full time and wrestling on top of it. Many times I was wrestling Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then 2 shows back to back on Sundays. So I was wrestling a lot, and I can't say I was always in the ring with the safest guys who had, my physical wealth, in their best interest. So I ended up just swallowing painkillers like they were candy all the time. And it wasn't like I was doing it for any specific reason other than to just try to function and go to work, get up and pay the bills, come home and be a functioning dad. And after a while, it was like they weren't working. So I was just tipping whiskey upside down in the glass every night, just trying to drink heavier to make the pills work faster and harder. And then it spiraled so fast. And, when I look back at it, it seems like it was such a long, ugly road up to the melting pot, I guess. And when I really sit and think about it in reality, it happened pretty quick. and there was a lot of warning signs that I didn't pay attention to. And there was a lot of warning signs that I was warned about from other people and I didn't listen to. And it became a thing. My daughter was I was present for my daughter. I was in the room for a lot of things, and my daughter was playing, and I just wasn't mentally there. I was checked out. I was on cloud 24/7. That's just no way to live as a human being. That's no way to parent. That's no way to set an example for the household that you're leading. And even then I could recognize that, but when you're in the midst of a drug addiction, it's not easy to just pull away from that and have, the voice of reason, pull you out of the gutter. So I ended up having to go to rehab. which that was a nightmare in itself. I was lucky to even make it to rehab.
Why do you say that?
I told people multiple times, you know, just in private conversations, that I can't believe I walked off the plane alive. That to look back and think that I even made it to rehab breathing is unreal to me. It's embarrassing to say that, but it's the honest to God truth. And I almost went to jail because I played my cards poorly, and I was just it was a madhouse in my head 24/7, and I didn't want to live like that anymore. And I was losing my family. You know, I was given the ultimatum, you know, go to rehab or we're gone. You know, my fiance, who stuck with me through every bit of it, and she did not have to. Right. She stuck with me, and but I say that, but I mean, if I'm being totally truthful, man, like, she had one foot out the door. She was ready to go because she was sick of this, and rightfully so. I put her through a lot, and I'll never forget when she dropped me off the airport to go to rehab. I tried to hug her, and like, it was like the most empty, meaningless hug I had ever received, and that's not her fault. You know, I did that, you know, and it hurt, and at the time I was bitter about it. But looking back, it was like, how can you blame her? Right. After all the things that I put her through, you know, couldn't blame her.
Wow. And there is a cool end to this story, because you've now decided to find I don't want to call it, I guess, a career, a vocation, if you will. You're an EMT, and some of that came out of what you've experienced here. Am I correct?
Sure is. It wasn't long after I got out of rehab. I want to say probably less than 6 months. A guy that I knew that was a customer, you know, in my day job, came in and was talking to me about the fire department. He was a fireman here in Phoenix, and he was talking to me about all the benefits and stuff to it. And I have some relatives that were in the medical field, and my uncle is actually a retired firefighter here in Phoenix as well. And he kind of hooked me with everything, and I pondered it for a little while. And you know, it's one of those things where, like, they tell you in rehab, like, go home and get busy doing something. Don't give yourself downtime, or you're going to find yourself right back here, and we'll see you soon. And I was in no position to argue that, or, you know, not believe them when they said that. And so when I came, you know, when I had that conversation with them, I just kind of sat and thought about it for a month or so, and just thought, you know what, like, it's time to do something better. You know, you caused a lot of damage in your life and in your family life, to your well-being, and it's time to make up for that. It's time to do better. And wrestling doesn't last forever, man. Like, I had to come to that decision too. It was like, I'm still going to chase wrestling, but you have to know that wrestling doesn't last forever. It can all end in one night. You know what I mean? As we saw with many guys. We saw it with Perro Aguayo. We saw it with Owen Hart. We saw it with a lot of guys that didn't die. They just got hurt so bad they couldn't continue.
Draws, for example, yeah.
So it just became like I weighed it out in my head, and, you know, the scale kind of tipped back and forth for a little while. And I finally was just like, you know what, I got to do something better. Like, I can't sit around and do this for my entire life, just sitting here waiting for, you know, what I hope will come out of a WWE contract. Like, it's just not reasonable to think like that when you have a family to feed too, you know. So I kind of just sat and thought to myself, like, look, dude, you're tough enough. You can balance school, you can balance the job as a firefighter and EMT, and you can balance chasing pro wrestling, and whatever works out, works out. You just hold your head high and just, you know, you did it your way. And that's, at the end of it, that's all that's going to matter, is that you did it your way and you made it out alive. And so I enrolled in my EMT course. That was a 17-week course, I believe, 17 or 19-week course. And just recently, I had passed my course last year, became a state certified EMT, and then just now passed my national registry test to become a nationally certified EMT, which makes me eligible to join the fire department later this fall if I could pass some of the tests as they put me through there, which is the end goal. So that way, you know, if for some reason I had to walk away from wrestling, you know, I can still put my daughter through college. I can still, you know, be a family man at home. I can still enjoy life doing something that I have learned to love just as equally as I love professional wrestling.
Beautiful. Well, that's awesome, man. And I'm very happy for you. As a guy, like I said, who's a fan of what you do in the ring, it's pretty cool to see you open up the way that you did. Is this natural for you? Was that natural for you to be that open about yourself, to be so introspective and let so many people in like you did with your posts on Facebook and like you're doing right now with this interview?
No, actually, at first that was something I kind of thought I would never speak about publicly. Very, very few people knew about it. I mean, hell, most of my family didn't even know I was in rehab until almost halfway through my stay there. Until finally, my fiance Megan finally just kind of came out and told even her parents. And to my knowledge, I didn't catch any backlash or anything like that. So had I caught any backlash, I probably wouldn't have been so open about it. And it did take me some time. It wasn't until I got a year clean that I finally kind of really came out in the open, like, okay, this is why I was gone for a long time. I was actually supposed to stay longer in rehab. Most people don't know this. I was supposed to stay longer in rehab, but I told them I had to get home, and they argued and argued and argued. I said, you don't understand. I said, I have a television taping, and I just started working for this company. The producers don't know I'm in rehab. I need to get home and get to TV, because if I screw this up, I don't know if or when I'll ever get another opportunity. And if I ever want another shot at, you know, being anything in the wrestling business, this is not the way to go, screwing it up by, you know, no showing a television taping when I'm just now getting on. So there was a lot of things that, you know, reasonably and rightfully so would have shuttered me in more to not bring it up publicly. But I guess I just kind of thought later on, it was like, you know, nobody is going to benefit from this. And there's a lot of guys that I know that either went through it already or are going through it now. And there's a lot of guys in the locker room that, well, I wouldn't say a lot. There's a few guys in the locker room that you probably wouldn't think had any kind of instrumental value to me getting clean and feeling a little bit better about where I was at in life, that I work with now. Two of my best friends, Brothers of Chaos, I've gone, you know, on record saying that, you know, I've been pretty tight with them for years. R3 especially, I've known him since I was 15 years old, so he did know about it. I don't know if he knew about the extent of it. I can't say I was totally truthful about that from the, you know, at the beginning, but when I reached a year clean and I really came out about it, I received a lot of open arms. Like I was expecting a little bit of backlash, and I would have had to eat it wholeheartedly. I wouldn't have even been able to argue or rebuttal it, but and a lot of people were so supportive, and that meant a lot to me. You know, people that certainly didn't have to show any kind of support were absolutely supportive, and widened the comfort zone for me to be able to open up and talk about it. And now it's kind of an open book. It happened. It's over. I got through it. And, you know, I'm hoping that if there is anybody else out there that needs the help, that, you know, they have the strength to get up and get it, because that is not always the easiest thing to do, is ask for the help. And I'm always available, you know.
Very cool. Kind of a goofy question, but of course your character, the Man in Black, it's kind of known that you're a little bit of a bar brawler. You are known to be a guy who enjoys a drink or two. Is that cool to balance, you know, with your personal situation, to balance the character versus who you really are?
Yes, absolutely. That's actually that's one aspect that I think I'm enjoying about my professional wrestling career right now out of anything is getting out of rehab. Like, you kind of hope life is nice and bright when you get home, and it's not quite like that. But your behavior has to change, and your way of thinking and your mentality and the way you react to life has to change. And I feel like when I walk through the curtain and the lights are on and the cameras are on, I get to kind of unleash the bad behavior that normally I would have resorted to during my drug addiction. So I get to kind of have a controlled leash on the old Alex, you know, and I just kind of get, you know, you kind of get to see a glimpse of him and his piss poor attitude. And the Man in Black thing kind of just started brewing a little bit because I was already stewing in this addiction problem and wasn't open about it to any of my promoters, not many of my friends, and certainly none of my family. And I kind of started coming up with this Man in Black character and juggled it around for a long time. Like, could I make it work? Because I had to transition from my old character to this one. And Mick Greenwood, who is our executive producer for Championship Wrestling from Arizona, was totally monumental in the adaptation and even the birth of the Man in Black being televised. I had tried it out on a couple of non-televised shows locally that I don't think people really understood, but Mick had a huge hand in making the Man in Black what he is today. And Mick was one guy I could honestly say that when I pitched the idea to him, even though I didn't totally understand what I wanted to do with the character yet, he kind of already understood the picture that I was having a hard time already painting, and he really helped me out with this one. And we kind of went for broke on it, and luckily it paid off. So now whenever I go out on TV, I get to unleash the old behavior just without all the shitty consequences that come along with it, I guess.
Very cool. All right, so I've been to a few of the TV tapes down at Nile Theater here in Mesa. I know the biggest one that we've yet to see is coming up September 8th. How huge is AZ100 for the success of the company?
Well, I guess I could put it to you this way, and I know some would probably argue this, but if you remember when ECW had their first pay-per-view, and it was featured in Beyond the Mat when...
Yeah, barely legal.
Exactly, yeah, and I was still a little kid. But,
You're making me feel so old. I was
Heyman gave his
16 when that aired. 16, wow.
You were what?
I was 16 when that aired.
I don't even, what year was that?
97.
97. I was, okay, so I was 4 years old.
There you go.
Give or take. Yeah. But no, I mean, I kind of related to that. Like, that was like the go for broke moment. It's not like they hadn't been on, some sort of circuit, mainstream wise in one shape or another. But that was where they put all the eggs in the basket and went for broke. And I feel like this might be that episode where we did it. This might be the episode where, if there was ever an episode that was going to raise the bar and set the standard of what this company is supposed to look like and stand for, it's going to be episode 100. So I think it's pretty appropriate and fitting that Mike and I get to go one-on-one on episode 100. And I will say that I'm so proud that we've gotten to have this kind of momentum behind us, and the company has backed us 100% and have totally, put jet fuel in this whole entire storyline between me and Mike, and it's gotten us to where we're at now. And I'm really proud of that because we're doing it without a championship. We're doing it without any kind of substantial item that would be up for grabs. It's just a bloodbath hate feud that I feel like we can take anywhere, anytime, and it'll never die out. I feel like this is a flame that will just burn on its own, and I'm excited to see where we go after this.
Absolutely, so am I. And that kind of leads me to my final question for you. What are Alex Salyers' future goals for professional wrestling?
Well, I'm flying by the seat of my pants right now and just taking every booking I can, trying to make sure I can roll out of the ring in one piece every night. But I would obviously I'd take a WWE contract in a heartbeat, but on a smaller note and at a more reasonably paced note, I would like to travel outside of the country a little bit more. There's some talks about me working down in Mexico coming up later this year, and then obviously, Japan would be big on the agenda. I know that's a pretty hard thing to accomplish, so I'm not necessarily putting all my eggs in that basket. I'll just cross my fingers for it for now. But right now, my biggest goal as far as pro wrestling is to work my butt off for Championship Wrestling from Arizona and do anything I can to help launch the momentum for this company and do my part and do anything I can to contribute, because this company has done a lot for me, and in return, I'm willing to do a lot for this company.
Very cool. Well, as a guy who's I worked it out mathematically, I'm 12 years your senior. As a guy who's 12 years your senior, you're doing a good job with what you're doing. It's a lot of fun to watch what you guys are doing down in the Nile Theater. And I love watching you guys on Channel 7, AZTV, every Saturday night at 2 a.m. You know, it's ironic you keep mentioning ECW because if you might not remember this, but those who watched the original ECW, it was on Sports Channel at 2 a.m. Saturday nights. So kind of an ironic little connection between the two companies. So
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't even put that together until you just said that, matter of fact.
there you go. So yeah, there's a lot of little nuances that you can tie together there. Obviously, your guys' show maybe isn't quite as gritty as theirs. Theirs was a little bit more of a dirty company, but it's an enjoyable product to watch, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do.
Kids are, you know, your kids are pretty safe watching us at any given time. So, with the exception of me and Mike James being out there, but that's a different story.
I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do. All right, man. Hey, before I let you go, one last favor from you. Can I get a ID, a liner, just saying this is Alex Salyers, and you're in the Wrestling Epicenter.
Yep, this is Alex Salyers, and you are in the Epicenter, the Wrestling Epicenter, correct? Yep.
That's right. Yes.
We'll edit that part out. We'll retake that. This is Alex Salyers, the Man in Black. You can catch me on Championship Wrestling from Arizona on AZTV and the Fight app, and you are on the Wrestling Epicenter.
This is the Wrestling Epicenter. For over 15 years, we've brought you the top names in professional wrestling for exclusive interviews. Everybody you see here has been interviewed by our site. But we're more than just interviews. So be sure and check out WrestlingEpicenter.com for news, results, information, and of course our store. WrestlingEpicenter.com, your #1 source for wrestling information.